Hey.
Hello, everyone.
We're going to start with a giggle today. We're going to start with a giggle today. We ended the show with a giggle last time.
Oh, I'm just taking my cushion away and I've realised I've dropped about 10 inches.
Oh my gosh.
I've got to put it back.
Oh, you look fine.
It's one of those wobbly ones that helps you back. Better. Hey, everyone.
Yeah, hey, everyone. Welcome to the Animal Rights Show. So we're gonna start off with something a little bit different to lead into our conversation. As you can see, Aiyana is back, our gracious guest panelist for the second time. That way, yeah, that's not that way. You can never get things right, can you? No matter what you do, though, you can never get them right.
No, Nella, you try it diagonally.
Oh.
All you got to do is do that, though, Wendy. You're cheating.
I know. It was easy for me today.
Yeah. So Dave says, "Where's Brian?" Not here yet. We, still warming up
Snoozing.
And doing the vocal exercises and stuff like that.
He's still, I think he's having a little pre-show snooze under the table over there.
Speaking of vocal exercises, we're going to start off with just a run through of a basic track that the Vegan Songstress has been working on, and the good news is that she's heading for the studio in this week coming, hopefully, at least for the first time. So it's taken us a bit of time to get it all organized, but it's all coming together now. So we just thought this is a rough version of I think she's got about 4 next songs yet, and so we'll then have to decide which one of those 4, but let's have a listen to this one. We've all heard this already and we all like it, so oh, hang on a minute, I'm got it in the wrong place. There you go.
I've been wandering around in a bad state of mind for too long. And I can tell you it's not something I would strongly recommend. No. One day I spoke to a man who told me all the things I didn't want to know, but it opened up my heart, my mind, and my soul. One day I saw the light shining through the blinds, and I knew from then on everything was gonna be alright. I've been running around this noisy city for far too long. Man wearing an A-lip shirt sat next to me on a bench in Stephen's Green and said, "Hey, how you doing?" I told him I want to change the world in this book I was on, and about animal rights and veganism. One day I spoke to a man who told me all the things I didn't want to know, but it opened up my heart, my mind, and my soul. One morning I saw the light shining through the blinds, and I knew from then on everything was gonna be alright. I've been wandering around in a bad state of mind for too long. And I can tell you it's not something I would strongly recommend. No. One day I spoke to a man who told me all the things I didn't want to know, but it opened up my heart and my soul. One morning I saw the the light shining through the blinds, and I knew from then on everything was gonna be alright. Oh, yeah, everything was gonna be alright. Yeah.
Abrupt ending. There.
I really like that abrupt ending, though. It's really like,
Yeah.
that's it. I've done it. That's
Okay.
brilliant.
Well done,
I love
Jennifer.
it. Jennifer, it's so good. It's really Jennifer's songs are really catchy. I was listening to one of her other ones, you know, "Loving You," and it sticks in my head. I was singing it earlier, so very catchy tunes, Jennifer.
Oh, that's a
Well done,
17-minute one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really good, that one. I love that as well.
Yeah, we've edited a shorter version of it, but that's not out yet. But yeah, so well done, Jennifer, who's in the chat, as you can see. And so, yes, Artivism. I suppose it's you often think about music, but it could be anything, really, can't it? So when you hear the word Artivism, Anya, what do you think? Aiyana.
I think art that has a politically conscious message and aims to change something or spark thought in someone or express something.
Like graffiti.
Yeah, like graffiti, like music, like digital art, like writing, films. Yeah, any kind of creation, I think, is a form of art. I think language even is a form of art as well. And I think Artivism isn't necessarily something for artists. I think it's something that everybody can take part in and engage in, because art is just a natural way of being. It's just a natural, normal part of life. Creation is life, and it's for everybody.
Yeah, I think
you had a project, didn't you, Aiyana? Anti-Speciesist Art Collective. Is that the right title?
Yes,
I know you said it's, and I know you said it's a bit of a snail project at the moment because you've got other projects going on. But what was the inspiration behind that, and how did what became of that, or what came out of that project?
Well, it kind of initially started because I was organizing events called Vegan Arts Night, where I would get different artists like musicians, poets, people to do like speeches and stuff, physical art like live drawing, drawing, and it was all as like a fundraiser. Whoops. That's Leela. It was to fundraise.
Delinquent dog.
Yes, of course. Breath in.
Of course.
What was I saying? Oh yeah, so the events were essentially to raise money for sanctuaries and our local SAB group, and it was also just a way to like share our art and be creative and hone into the skills that the activist communities have, basically the creative talents that exist within us. And then from that, the Anti-Speciesist Arts Collective was created because I wanted to do more events and different kinds of events under this wider topic of using art as a tool for liberation, community as a tool for liberation and care, and understanding that among all the like action that we might take if we're involved in activism, among all the conversations that we're having, it's very important also to find a creative outlet and to feel community and be cared for, basically, because it can, I think, take a toll on our mental health. So that's kind of what the Anti-Speciesist Arts Collective is about. It's about reimagining humanity and animality and what those mean outside of like binary species, is thinking about community care and using art as a tool for liberation.
Oh, sounds good. Is that like an online thing or a community-based actual getting together thing, or both? Or
It was initially supposed to be an in real life community get together thing, and it was with the Vegan Arts Night, but obviously it's mostly been online, which is why it's been a bit slow, because all of our plans were to be in real life. So for obvious reasons, it's mostly online at the moment.
And I know that one of the things that seems to interest you a lot in terms of either artivism or activism in general is the sort that is empowering and the sort that is disempowering, or kind of revolutionary and counter-revolutionary, I think. And for example, when you did the Beyond Species podcast, you were talking about how you really like the kind of non-structure of the Earthling experience, because it helped kind of activists to grow. So that's the kind of spontaneous kind of stuff that you like, really, I suppose, is it?
Yeah, yes. Uncaged art that doesn't have to fit a specific ideology or set of rules. Art that is expressive, and art that is rebellious, and art that changes things, basically. Like graffiti, it's an expression. It's reclaiming our communities, saying this is where we live. We're not going to let like corporations or massive businesses put all their rubbish up on the walls. This is our space. And yeah, I definitely prefer art forms that are leaning towards expressiveness and openness rather than fitting a particular set of rules.
So in this frame, art is not only resistance, but it's also a means for well-being and community building.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it's so important because everybody can engage in art. It's just a normal thing. So it's accessible in that way. There are so many, like a multitude of forms. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to look a certain way to be art or to be right or to be correct or to be good. It's just about getting your message across, expressing what you want to express, and creating.
And yeah, like you were saying about sort of being about community and well-being as well, it's true, isn't it, that being creative and even using our imagination, they're really beneficial for our personal well-being. So yeah, not about being perfect or creating something like that can be hung up at the Tate Gallery, although why shouldn't it be, because that's just subjective, but yeah. it's that being able to put your creativity into something, and along with kind of physical exertion and breathing and all these kind of things that are really good for getting through our stress cycles in the body, apparently imagination and creativity is also one of them. So it helps us biologically to come out of stress cycles physically, so it kind of takes us through and beyond to come into our calmer parasympathetic nervous system and things like that. So it's actually scientifically shown as well, proven to be really beneficial. So I love that.
I love that you said that. I've been learning lots about the para and sympathetic nervous systems recently, so I'm a little nerdy.
Oh, have you?
Sounds like a big word to me.
I know, sometimes you have to, I'm thinking, I hope this word comes out right. A big word, it's like, I think it came out right. Yeah. No, it's true. And of course, with art, you can really convey a powerful message, can't you? Through images or songs, poetry, dance, theatre, whatever it might be. You can sometimes convey a strong message in a short space of time because of the powerful nature of whatever you're expressing, much more so than just actually speaking or saying words or having a conversation with someone. Sometimes people get a real emotional connection or reaction to art on a visceral level that they might not get from you just speaking to them. It can be very, very powerful.
Definitely. I think as well, like going back to what you were saying about imagination, but also just generally about art and creativity, that I think is really what's going to help us build the communities that we want to see and move towards liberation. If we're thinking in the same sort of patterns and repetitiveness of capitalism, of the world that we're living in, which is, so I think that's another thing, being okay with the fact that we might not always be uncomfortable and going past our comfort zone in that creativity.
Something you said just really tickled me then, but that's just the mood I'm in. We know when you said raised in a box, it made me think of an old sketch by, I think it was Monty Python, about Oh, that's luxury. I was born in a cardboard shoebox on the middle of the road or something. I don't know if do you remember that, Roger? Do you remember that?
It's the Four Yorkshiremen sketch, yeah.
Yeah, the Four Yorkshiremen sketch. Sorry, that was just my brain's going off on.
Yeah, you were lucky. You're close to my heart, that sketch. But
yeah, you were lucky. Raised in a box, you were lucky. It's that kind of thing, isn't it? You'll have to check that one out, Aiyana.
Aiyana wants to get everybody out of boxes. It's interesting because you were talking about really how the school is a box as well. And it traps your imagination, and you need to escape that as well. I mean, you even talked about the vegan movement being a little bit restrictive as well. In that sense, and there's a lot of sociology about the function of schools, and it is in that kind of vein, the fact that schools are there to kind of knock kids into shape, which in other words line them up for a job within the capitalist system,
yeah, exactly. It's school to prison pipeline or school to labor pipeline, whether that labor is physical or academic. And I mean in a lot of ways, in terms of how we're raised, boxes end up just feeling safer because we don't have to explore. We just get to do the same things every day. We don't get to express ourselves. We get stuck in the same feelings every day, and we don't understand the expansiveness of what we can be and who we can be and like the people around us can be. And sometimes we get so stuck in boxes that we project those things onto other people. And I really agree with what you were saying about school as a box, because school is like the place that we are first conditioned into oppression, if not in our homes. And it's really just like a melting pot of various oppressions. Patriarchy is held up in the dress codes, for example, which are incredibly misogynistic, incredibly gendered. The curriculum is institutionally colonialist and racist and upholds ideals that are specifically favoring imperialism and white supremacy. And just the environment itself is just so repressive. Like, my mom was saying that she never experienced this in her school, so it might just be a new thing. But there is like a fully in place rule now where students are not allowed to remove their blazers without asking the teacher, let alone go to the toilet, let alone leave the room, not allowed to remove their blazers. Like when I was at school, we had to get like permission from the head teacher. Like, okay, so today's the hottest day of the year, you're allowed to remove your blazers whenever you want. But every other day you have to specifically ask the teacher, and they can deny you if they feel like it. They denied a student the right to go to the toilet, and she was on her period and she bled on herself. This institution is oppressive. Children are oppressed, and it hurts me when we overlook that. And it's so frustrating to be a child in this world and see how little we are respected and see how little our oppression is cared about and is understood. And rant over.
No, good to rant.
Rant number one. To kind of bring it back to the movement and back to that point you made about earthling experience, I wonder whether, because obviously what tends to happen is when you get put in a box, either by the education system or your family or whatever, right, or even a movement, there is a danger then that people getting comfortable within it.
Yes,
and
exactly.
I wonder whether, I mean, first of all, do you understand why people are a little bit like that? I mean, like you were saying about, you're not allowed to take your blazer off, you're not allowed to walk out of the cube, without permission, this kind of thing. So it's good training for that. But I just wonder whether you think, well, first of all, on the one hand, people get comfortable with that and they kind of like to be told what to do. And then the other movement question for me would be, how do we encourage people to kind of rebel against that? What do you think?
I think it's a lot of internalized oppression, and I think moving away from that is very much about understanding that we have autonomy. I think that that is not even a thought that pops into many people's heads, that we are allowed to, or should be allowed to at least, like, make decisions about our own bodies, about our own lives, and that not everything should be dictated by other people, that we can be responsible for ourselves. And I mean, this kind of domination and this kind of top-down hierarchical thinking that is so present within the mainstream movement, it is something that is enforced everywhere we go. And so I understand why people think that way. It's so ingrained in us that we don't even realize that we're living in a box. We don't even understand what living in a hierarchy means. And so I think for me, just speaking to my experience, when I was introduced to the vegan movement and was involved in similar kinds of activism, I thought I was doing something like super change making without realizing that I was still in a box. And I think there are so many boxes like layered. It's like a Russian doll, so many on top of each other, that you remove one and you think you've done it, and then you realize that you're actually under another, so you've got to remove that, and you think, but then it just keeps going and going and going and going. So yeah, I think a lot of it has to do as well with respect, having the ability and the want to respect yourself and to listen to yourself and your body and to trust yourself. So oppression makes us doubt ourselves all the time. It makes us doubt that our mind, our body, our gender, our sexuality, our skin, our culture is enough, is good enough, is worthy, is the right thing to listen to, is okay to be or live or do. And I think that a lot about liberation, our own liberation, our self-liberation, is about trusting ourselves and trusting that instinct that we all have within us that tells us when we are oppressed, that tells us when we need to move out of a box, when we are not in a situation that feels natural to us. And I think that capitalism and the oppressions that we live in really severs us from who we are and listening to ourselves. And so we doubt ourselves, we don't trust ourselves, and that is echoed in everything that we do within movements that are supposed to be revolutionary, that are supposed to create change, and outside of it. Whether we're aware of it or not, the work of undoing this is constant because we're constantly living under these systems of oppression.
Well, from a sociological point of view, it's the things that we don't particularly notice which is really the important thing. So you know, like the easygoing racism, the easygoing sexism in society, you know, the kind of patriarchal kind of structure, we don't notice it, and so that therefore it becomes ever more powerful, because for us it's almost like not there. You know, when you've got something that is kind of very kind of in your face, you kind of notice it. It's yes. The stuff that is latent underneath that's a problem.
I definitely agree.
We've got loads of comments coming through. Dave made me chuckle. Dave said they stopped going to school and they learnt more from Star Wars than they ever learnt from school, which I love Star Wars. Yeah, I think you're right there.
Well, Star Wars is cowboys and Indians in space, isn't it?
There was a comment. There was oh yeah, Amber's comment. The school. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Star Wars inspired me to think more than school ever did. And then Amber's got a comment at 6:22. The school uniforms look like office suits. It's just like prepping the next batch of workers, and that's exactly. I think you said that earlier. Either Roger or Aiyana. I think you said that it literally is preparing children to go into the next layer of oppression once they leave school. Then, isn't it? Like going to the job you're meant to. I remember as a kid, and I've always rejected all these kind of rules. Actually, just to show everyone your sign, Aiyana, behind you. I don't know if anyone can read it. Oh, you can't quite make it out with the lights.
It's lit up now, yeah.
Oh, should I turn it off?
Yeah.
You can read it if you can turn it off.
Because it just looks really bright. There we go. Yay, break the rules. And I don't know about you, but I always felt like that at school. I always felt like there's just so many rules about what you can wear, how short your skirt was, and how you had to have your tie even. So I used to like make my tie like the smallest possible. Like you're supposed to wear it like the thick side down. And I used to always like tie it and have the tiniest little bit of tie there, and then have the skirt as short as possible because they wanted it below the knee, and it would be like you're not allowed to do this. And used to just, obviously everyone was just trying to break the rules in little ways, whatever they could.
You rebel, you rebel. You're a terrible rebel.
Aren't we all though? I'm sure everyone on this call right now, everyone in the chat, I'm sure we're all delinquents. We are, otherwise we wouldn't be activists. I'm sure everyone's got their own story.
We've got a very simple and straightforward question here from Dave. Does anybody want to tackle that one?
I mean, I guess, I mean, there are, this is not me trying to tackle it, it's just my first thoughts, but there are many alternatives to capitalism. I find anarchism the most intriguing. I don't know enough of it to really speak much on it, but it's anti-hierarchy, it's anti-state, it focuses on autonomy, and it sits well with my personal thinking about the world and thinking about how I want the world to look, how I would want the world to look. But there's socialism, there's communism, there's many other things that are way more specific and detailed, and yeah.
Also, I think we don't know to have the. Oh, sorry, I thought that you were.
No, I was just going to say, like, just research and find what feels most good to you. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
Oh, I just want to say that I don't think that we need to have a detailed plan or a very specific answer in order to know that something is wrong and does not work and it's oppressive for so many people. Okay. I mean, we can decide that we need to move on, that this is bad for us, even if we don't know, we haven't imagined in detail the world as we would like to be. We don't need to know the specifics in advance.
Yeah, I'd agree with that as well. Yeah, it's almost like you just have to decide and find what isn't working, and then work your way through, and it's going to be messy, and there'll be failure along the way, and it's just going to be a lot of probably struggling to find other ways, but you have to start making headway somewhere, don't you? And we haven't got crystal ball thinking. We can't go, all right, we're going to go from here to here. We just have to go, okay, let's muddle through, let's build better communities, let's have a different way of, like we're going to talk about mutual aid. I mean, things like mutual aid are quite radical in the way it brings people together in community and collaboration in a different way to let's just all, exploit as much as we can, get everything we can from the system or from each other and make as much profit as we can. There's just different ways of doing things on perhaps a more local level as well. And maybe if we do things differently locally, then that might have a bigger effect more globally. I don't know. It's hard to think of a global system, isn't it, that would work for everyone, but
think globally, act locally. That's what they say, isn't it?
Yeah. I don't think a global... Sorry, go on.
No, go on. I was just going to make a silly joke, so carry on.
Oh, quick, carry on, Aiyana.
Yeah. Please cut me off. Every possible opportunity.
I was going to say, I don't think there will be I don't think there is a global solution or a set solution, because whatever the future looks like, everybody's going to have completely different opinions on what it should be. And I think we should work specifically to our communities, because that's the only place that we can speak to. If we start saying that this one particular ideology is going to work for the whole world, then I think we're overstepping, because we can't experience the whole world, and we're behaving similarly to colonists in that we're saying that this one system should be everybody's system, and if somebody doesn't follow the system, then they're wrong. No, this is your personal belief, and we'll develop a community that is not capitalism, basically, and is better than that, and respects people. And I agree with what Nella was saying. We don't have to have a specific set plan with every specific thing like all smoothed out, because we can't. We just have to move away from capitalism. It's enough to know that capitalism is bad, and that's really all you need to know. You just need to know that that's bad, and we've got to find something else.
Dave,
Well,
Brian
the stars
came
arrived
just
anyway.
especially to see you, Dave. Dave only came along to see you, Brian, so I'm really glad you've made an appearance.
And would you agree that mutual aid is like the enemy of capitalism, because capitalism wants us to feel alone, that we need to survive alone within the system, and not really care about people around us, and not really putting any energy to the community. This is kind of a danger for capitalism.
Yeah, I agree. I think like the principle of mutual aid probably feels new to a lot of people because of the like pandemic, I guess, but it's a very old practice, obviously, and it exists not even on just on an intrahuman level. It exists at the like trees, for example, engage in it with their mycorrhizal or mycorrhiza. They have like these maps of communication in the ground through their roots, and if there's a tree that's kind of broken or needs support, they send all the nutrients and they support that tree and basically bring the tree back to life. Or like even at the atomic level, the way that I think thinking about my chemistry, I think it's atoms form molecules, and the way that they do that is by giving their electrons to each other so that they can join together and create like their little elemental molecular communities, basically. So I think that mutual aid as a practice exists everywhere and is not a new thing, and doesn't necessarily have to be accredited to a specific person or ideology. It's just the way of existing that is natural, the way of existing that means we support everybody in our community, that we act with solidarity and not charity, and that, like you were saying, we just care about each other, and this can be like a direct rebellion against capitalism, because capitalism focuses on individualism and disconnection. So I think connection to ourselves, like I was kind of mentioning earlier, and connection to each other is incredibly important.
It's really difficult, isn't it, to because I think we all would have like maybe a similar understanding in that we need to care more, we need to have more compassion, more mutual aid, more collaboration, and yet it's so hard to almost do those kind of things under the system we're in, because you get caught up having to fit into the system, don't you, in a way, like we're all kind of trapped maybe having to do certain jobs or to pay our rent and our bills and things like this, and have to do certain things to fit in with that system. And it almost feels like you're always trying to make radical changes within a very, very oppressive, powerful system that it just feels so difficult. And I wonder how many communities would have to kind of make a change for it to have some kind of tipping point in which the system would have to start to change around those communities. Do you know what I mean? I just wonder about those kind of things, but
yeah,
not that any of us would know the answers to that.
I think it's kind of about small communities, again, the small communities, but like small communities becoming independent from the state and these systems of oppression, because I doubt it's going to be like a worldwide immediate change. It's going to be small places that are going to be independent, but also interdependent and autonomous. But I guess one way that we can engaging in mutual aid whilst we're still having to navigate systems of oppression is kind of, for want of a better word, like budgeting it into our lives, if that makes sense. It doesn't necessarily have to be like monetary, because not everybody has the ability to give money. People are poor. But I think making an effort to set aside time for it, like we set aside, like, I don't know, TV watching time, we set aside time to cook and eat dinner, set aside time to engage in radical practices like mutual aid, and build up your skills, build up your confidence, build up your awareness, and like survive, but also contribute and invest in our future where we will hopefully thrive.
What I love about the mutual aid, as I understand it, and you mentioned this on the podcast that Roger mentioned earlier, the Beyond Species one, that you were listening to a speaker, and I can't quite recall the name of the speaker now, but they were saying when you first come into a group, when you're trying to build that kind of community of collaboration, you say what it is you need, but you also say what it is that you can offer. And I love that sense of bringing that sense of what you can offer, because I think often people generally will go into situations thinking, what can I get out of this, or what do I need? And even in relationships, like you see that with other animals as well, people will go, and especially people who go and buy sort of those animals, as we were talking last week, that are colonized into pethood. It's like, oh, my little girl wants a pet kitten, or I want a dog in order to keep me company. It's all about us and what we can take and what we need, rather than what can we actually give, what is it that we can offer to in these relationships. And I think that for me really speaks of a very making real connections with each other, I think, which is lacking, I think, in the world so much.
Yeah, so the person's name is Eshi Kiyamazuri, and shout out to them because they're just amazing, and I would suggest that everybody look into them because they're just a wonderful person as well. And yeah, that really speaks to me, like offering and giving, as well as like receiving. And I feel like we mentioned this last week, or maybe I was thinking about it afterwards, but humans don't necessarily have like a specific place in the world. Like bees, for example, the world would die very soon without bees. And there are many other species of animals, whereas humans kind of exist in this space where it's not necessary for us to exist. I'm not trying to say this in like an eco-fascist or horrible way. But I think that's a really important thing of like understanding that we are valuable and that we can give something to the world. We can offer something to the world, rather than constantly extracting from and taking from it and stealing from it without giving it back. That is where we have gone wrong, because nature, ecosystems, communities are always about balance. They are always about mutual aid. They're always about giving and also receiving. And humans are stuck in this loop of constantly taking and taking and taking. And at some point, we're going to have nothing left to take, and we'll be so exhausted from the taking that we'll have nothing left to give.
I suppose the question there would be, I mean, does that imply some kind of form of primitivism? Because anything which is labeled civilization, as it were, implies that we're going to have an impact on the world, even if we don't really want to. I mean, look at all the arguments about veganism and crop deaths, and all the kind of things about the fact that just being here, and especially if we want vehicles and if you want computers and anything to do with modern life, if you like, it's going to imply that we're going to have quite an impact on the world. So mitigating that's going to be a real problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
Interesting philosophical question, actually. So
Yes.
So first of all, Bernie V and Deb, hi you two, by the way, they're talking about how veganism will bring out the best in people, which is diametrically opposed to capitalism, which brings out the worst. And then also Dave says, I feel that if you have a cruel, selfish species, all social and economic systems will be cruel and selfish. And I suppose that just kind of makes me think, raises the question of, are humans inherently cruel and selfish?
Well, it is that's the problem. It then leads to that conversation about human nature or our theories about it. Are we like this because of the system that we're born into, or are we inherently like this and we'll fuck up everything that we get involved in, no matter what, that kind of thing. That's always been the big challenge to anarchy, because anarchy's got a problem with, for example, imprisonment and punishment and this kind of stuff. And then there's a problem with, well, what do you do with people who, as it were, are very destructive and almost like irrational, and so they kind of rebel against that system, which we then think is a good system. So yeah, it's a problem.
Aiyana, you might have something to say on that, actually, because you mentioned last week you're very much an advocate against imprisonment, carceral systems, and that kind of thing. What would your take be on that? So if you have a society that runs without these systems of imprisonment and that form of caged oppression in that way, how would you see that playing out in terms of perhaps people who are not kind of... Is that Nella just disappearing?
It looks like it, yeah.
Must have a connection problem. How does that, how do you see that playing out in societies where people, have to coexist and where people might not necessarily be living within the agreed rules or whatever we want to call it?
I want to preface what I'm about to say with the fact that I'm still learning and I'm definitely not an expert on this, and I'm still growing in my understanding of this. I think a lot of it has to do with the world we live in and the systems that we live in, because so much of what we consider crime in the world right now is a lot to do with people trying to survive, I think, and navigate a place where they don't have their needs met. Like, people will steal because they don't have food. People will rob because they don't have food. People do drugs because they don't have the tools to deal with the suffering that they're experiencing. So in an ideal world where those things would be lessened, because it's impossible to completely eradicate them, I think we have to focus on the ability to change and the ability to transform ourselves. I believe that even the most horrible person in the world has the ability to be better. And I don't think that the most horrible person in the world should be subjected to being locked up in a cage, being in a prison, because they can change, because nobody deserves that. And because if it can happen to somebody, it can happen to anybody. And I don't have like a specific answer on what we do because I'm still learning, but I think it's a lot to do with community coming together to help people foster skills of accountability, because that's not something that we're taught in this world right now. We're not taught to be accountable. We are taught to be defensive, because when somebody critiques us or criticizes us or says that you hurt me, you harmed me, we have to defend ourselves because we are so individualistic. If we exist in communities that are more interdependent, then hopefully we will have systems in place where we can deal with these problems and foster these skills of accountability and of growth and of transformation.
Welcome back, Nella. By the way,
Welcome back.
Sorry about this technical problems.
This is an interesting observation, I think, from Bernie. Veganism has qualities of socialism, but it goes deeper. I'd agree with that. And there is that spiritual quality that he's talking about that transcends all of the belief systems. Now, that gets us into kind of pioneer territory, which is very kind of, controversial and potentially kind of elitist, in the sense that, people like Watson saw veganism as the kind of greatest cause on earth, and that it could be an overarching principle for everything because it's based on justice and non-violence and peace and stuff. But I think they're getting at the kind of thing that Bernie is suggesting there, that socialism with spiritual knobs on. Should we say that? I don't know.
Spiritual knobs. That's not a phrase I thought I'd hear today, but let's go with it.
Yeah.
I had something in my mind to say then, and I can't remember now. I think the spiritual knobs threw me.
Yeah, I had something as well.
The spiritual knobs threw Aiyana and Ella as well, well, not just me.
Oh, well, you can always rely on me, can't you? Again, I suppose you then would have to interrogate the difference between anarchy and socialism and all those kind of ideas as well, which is very difficult. Even within anarchy, I mean, I would probably describe myself as a social anarchist, I would think, but there's quite a lot of kind of divisions within that frame of thought anyway, as well as there is in everything. Yeah.
Also, it's trying to limit yourself to one sort of set of rules or ideologies or one label. Often life is more complex than that, isn't it? Sometimes different elements of different things will work in different situations, and I think it's the fact that we almost think in these very simplistic terms, or it has to be either this or this. We have to have this system or this system. It's like, I think it's the way we think is actually problematic in the first place that creates these systems. Our very way of thinking and creating binaries and you know, boxes, like we were talking about earlier, creating a box that we have to fit in. So we have to be an anarchist, or we have to be a socialist, or a capitalist, or whatever. It's
but principles are different, though, aren't they? Here's something from Deb, which goes to what Aiyana just said before. Yeah, because when you were talking before, I was thinking about Donald Trump, funny enough, and you know, the kind of sociological difference between kind of street crimes and sweet crimes, you know, as it's put, you know, like it's easy to explain why, you know, the very poor would steal, but why the very rich would do what they do, apart from it just being seen as an abuse of power, and might makes right. But then that then feeds into thoughts about human nature. I mean, what explains people like Donald Trump? And Debbie's saying, you know, do you think nobody can ever reach the point of no return?
I don't know, and I'm not afraid to say that I don't know. I don't think I've met enough people, luckily, who are like that, and who I have zero belief that they could ever change or improve who they are. I do think that a lot of this greedy behavior, like this abhorrent behavior of somebody like Donald Trump, is a lot to do with systems like white supremacy, has a lot to do with systems like capitalism. If we didn't live in capitalism, Donald Trump wouldn't have the ability, or Jeff Bezos wouldn't have the ability to exploit people in this way. So I think that systems of oppression give people abundant opportunities to be violent and to be abusive. And the more liberated our society is, the more liberated the world we're living in, the less opportunity there is for that. And hopefully then the less people will be engaging in that behavior. But I don't think I could properly answer your question. My answer would be, I don't know. I don't know enough to... Well,
neither do I. I mean, I think the fear is that people like Trump, and I suppose we shouldn't really pick out an individual, however abhorrent the individual is, but the fear would be that people like that are going to be like that in any system. That would be the fear, and then you've got a management problem then in this, you know, in that sense. So.
Yeah, as Aiyana said, go ahead, Wendy.
No, go ahead, Nella.
No, I mean, I'm thinking of what Aiyana said, that they won't have that power. So even if some humans are born like that, or I don't know what, they won't have the power to oppress others. Sometimes I think that we overthink possible problems that may arise in the future, and that hold us from moving towards that future.
Yes. I think that's another thing with like kind of related to what you were saying, Wendy, and kind of what we've been talking about throughout, about like classification and needing to know everything and needing to have every, you know, thought and process and idea completely boxed and organized. Like, we don't know. And we have to be courageous enough to move forward without all the knowledge in the world and experiment and grow, because we're not going to be able to just plonk like a fully formed ideology system that is perfect and organized to perfection. It's going to take trial, it's going to take error, but we're not there yet, and we have to get there before we start like really thinking out the specific details. And I'm sure this conversation and this question has been asked many times, and I'm sure there are an abundance of resources out there that we could engage in that answer this question in multiple ways. But I do agree with Nella. I do think that we overthink problems that we haven't necessarily even come across yet. And I think as well, just to pick up on what you were saying, Nella, about even if somebody's born like that, so let's say we don't have the social conditions that allow that, and somebody's just born in a way that makes them scary to other people or possibly violent towards other people. A lot of like mental illnesses are caused by trauma. A lot of the stigmatized mental illnesses that we have in our society that we tend to lock people up in a prison, in a cage for, is caused by trauma. Or even if they're born with it and it's not caused by trauma, at the end of the day, like, it's just a divergence, it's an illness. And in a liberated society, we wouldn't throw somebody in a cage for that. We would support them. And I think that's the important thing. We have to find a way to move past our want for revenge and punitive reaction and move towards the feeling of, okay, this wasn't the best thing, but this person obviously needs some kind of support.
Also, you see, it's ironic, isn't it, that some, you know, you will.
I just wanted to make clear that when I said they are born like this, I wasn't referring to people with mental illness.
Yeah.
Or the different ways our brains are wired. I was referring to politicians, for example.
Yeah, and I was just going to say about, it's ironic how we get people in prison who are perhaps in prison for like things like drug dealing or drug use, whereas you get pharmaceutical companies who are creating an opioid crisis in the United States and then making absolute like billions of dollars and then detaching themselves from the companies. Families who run these businesses detaching themselves and getting away with it, not being accountable, and actually just making a profit. And they're, you know, esteemed people in society, whereas the people who are suffering as a result of that deliberately created crisis, a lot of them are being sent to prison. And it's just things like that. It's not even a fair system, the one that we have right now anyway. And you know, people are sent to prison for all sorts of reasons, you know, including activists. So I'm sure Roger can speak to that as well. So we do have to question the system as it is, even in terms of punishment. Who are we punishing and why, and who really ought to be? If the system was fair, there'd be different people behind bars right now than some of the ones who already are, for sure.
Or no bars.
Or no bars. Yeah.
But I mean, going back to that, you know, I mean, like Aiyana talked about, you know, moving from what we've got to what we want, and it's always that transition that's always seen as problematic, because we've got to take everybody with us, as it were. And one thing in your podcast that really struck me, Aiyana, when you say capitalism knows what it's doing. You said that, you know, and I thought, well, yeah, that's going to make it even more difficult, in the sense that it's not just gonna lay down and let itself be overthrown if that's the way it was going to go. It's going to fight back, and it's going to do it in a sneaky way, and it's going to throw a few more crumbs from the top table if necessary. It does that all the time.
Yeah, capitalism is, I don't mean this in a positive way, but it's an incredible system in that it's like, for a concept, a very physical, real concept, it's so like conscious and is able to keep most of the people living under it so unconscious.
You said in that podcast, I've got it written down here, veganism is capitalist, lacking morals and principles. It's a money-making business, doesn't care for other animals. So
controversial. Aiyana. Go on.
To clarify, I meant mainstream veganism, not just veganism, mainstream veganism.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't take that out of context.
No,
It's typical journalist kind of thing to do that, isn't it? Yeah, so come on, just take that little clip and put that out there, and
And also,
very Daily Mail.
there is the problem that in many countries, the entry point for activism for many people was a very hierarchical system. So they got in the movement, and then you may doubt and challenge this notion of the hierarchy in activism or not. But that means that people are not aware from day one that this is a problem. So that's why, in my opinion, mainstream veganism is so powerful. Because people come into that without, myself included, without realizing all the different problems attached to this.
Yeah. I mean, I guess then we just need to start creating new points of entry into understanding veganism and anti-speciesism. We can't rely on people being sucked into the black hole of mainstream, because it is, at the end of the day, it's just more damaging than helpful. But I don't understand what you mean. It's very. Yeah, I've lost the words, but yeah.
I suppose we're always evolving as activists, though, aren't we? I suppose there's that sense of, you can look back at something. We were talking about this, I think, last week, before or after the show, that you can read something that you wrote, even months ago, or for me, it might be if I'd listened back to an old podcast episode that I'd done, or a post or something, you can look back and go, oh my God, I wouldn't say that now. I wouldn't write it that way. Or it makes you maybe have changed how you look at certain issues. But I think in a way that's a good thing, because it shows that you're...
It'd be worse if you said, oh, I wrote that 20 years ago and I stand by every word.
And it's still great. Yeah, no, because we have to be continually learning, don't we, and evolving and growing all the time. And our past incarnations of ourselves, when we look back, they might make us cringe, but without them, we wouldn't get to where we are. I suppose we have to go through those stepping stones, or
that's what I was thinking. Yes.
Yeah. Ooh, connected tonight, you and me, Aiyana, tonight. We've got that telepathy. Oh, we'll see. You got the right side.
Oh wait, no.
Yeah, no, it's
do you think that maybe this is a case where the theory will emerge from praxis if we start taking care of our communities, and especially our interspecies community, so everyone is considered a part, as it should be, a part of the community, and then some way the theory will emerge from the praxis?
Yeah, I think they I agree, they kind of both inform each other. I think that in order to practice anything, you have to have the theoretical knowledge first. But with the more practice you do, the more your theoretical knowledge changes, I guess, and evolves, like you were saying, Wendy. So I think they're both very equally important, and they both inform each other. I don't think one is better than the other, and they're both necessary. So.
Yeah, I know that when I've kind of asked Patrice Jones and Carol Adams that question, because they're both kind of they write books and they're also activists, they both said a very similar thing, in that their theory has evolved out of their practice, out of their activism, and then theory will inform them. So it's a sort of co-creating kind of relationship, really. It's not one or the other, they're both informing each other all the time, aren't they, I guess?
Well, that dynamic should be going on at Camp Beagle. When I was doing my PhD, there was somebody else doing it, and she was a member of the Donga tribe, so New Age travelers, and so they used to do a lot of things like setting up the little villages in forests and stuff, and try and resist motorway developments and all that, and swampy and digging, locking on and all that. And that community had the big thing about theory and praxis was two sides of the same coin, and that by actually doing it together, you're in the struggle, but you're also theorizing about what you've done. It's almost like you kind of deconstruct what you've done that day in terms of your theoretical position. It's more difficult when you're dealing with a bigger movement like the vegan movement, where there's kind of corporate elements to it and grassroots elements to it. They're not even really speaking the same language.
Yeah. Are they the same movement?
Well, yeah, exactly. That's an interesting question, that one.
Deb puts it beautifully. Deb, they were just the words my brain was looking for and failing. Symbiotic and synergistic. Thank you, Deb. Beautifully said. But that goes something else that I've been thinking about lately, in terms of, because we're talking about learning and evolving as well as advocates. Do you think sometimes, like when we're thinking about theory, because I know on here on the team, we love reading, we love going to webinars and listening to podcasts and all sorts of things. And I'm sure, Aiyana, I can't speak for you, but I imagine that you're the same. But do we sometimes do we make it a little bit, can it be elitist in that way? As in, if we're sort of, reading academic books that might not be accessible, available, maybe the language might be difficult. Are we, by expecting kind of advocates and activists to be kind of continually learning in that way with this kind of material, are we making the movement elitist in that way?
I think
complex issues and things like that.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, go on.
I know, it's embarrassing because I think I forgot what I was going to say now. I think,
not just me.
I think liberation is a personal responsibility. We can't be responsible for each other's liberation. We can't tell somebody else what to do, and we can't liberate somebody else for them. We can't radicalize someone else. That is them, that is their autonomy, that is their mind, that's their body. So I think us as individuals engaging in possibly inaccessible academic texts is not us promoting that inaccessibility towards other people, unless we expect everybody to have read that. But if we see our liberation as our responsibility and don't project things onto other people and understand that everybody's on their own journey, unless somebody's doing something really harmful and you kind of let's just have a conversation about that, can I maybe give you some critique, I've learned this really cool thing, then I think that approach is a fair approach. And I think the thing about accessibility is really more the responsibility of the writers of the academic books, the creators of the overly academic presentations and workshops, because they're the ones that are making it inaccessible. And if you are able to translate that into just a regular conversation with somebody who's maybe not aware of that and explain it super casually, or turn it into a short piece of writing that is just clearer, concise, then maybe that's part of the work that we could do to help other people who may not have access to that, or may not have time to read a really long paper, or don't understand it, if that makes sense. It's kind of a ramble, but
yeah. No, that's sometimes what I aim to do with the podcast, is I try to have conversations with people who've maybe written books or have a certain view on things, and then try to kind of have a conversation that is accessible and create some kind of value for activists to hear in a different way, and a chance to kind of platform that kind of stuff with, but kind of almost build bridges between, you know, different people in that way. So yeah, I really relate to what you just said.
Well, it's coming up to 10 past. Actually, there's an interesting sidebar going on in the chat. I don't know whether we want to engage with this or not. It's quite an interesting one. It's interesting to me, this idea, actually, because if you see what people are saying, this question does treat veganism as a diet in a way, because there is a sense that everybody goes vegan overnight, in the sense that one day you don't adhere to the philosophy of veganism, and then another day you do, irrespective of your diet, almost, right? And so I think I always find these kind of things interesting. I don't know whether people would agree with that, but, you know, they kind of, were you vegetarian first, seems to me to throw the question into, well, veganism is a diet.
But then you've got the other side of that, where certain people advocate for it's okay to eat a little bit of cheese or have a few eggs if, you know, we obviously might have a different opinion on that, but I suppose you get the other side of that. So then you would say, well, are those people who are perhaps out at a dinner having been served food with cheese or eggs in, and saying, okay, well, I don't want to be burdensome, so I'm just going to eat this, and, like, you know, then I'll go back to my full veganism tomorrow. Would we still say they are vegan, even though they are on board with the philosophy, but in practice not on at that moment? I guess it comes down to defining it, doesn't it? And
tricky, isn't it?
It is
I would say that it has to do with a person's ability to do or not to do that. I mean, we have to accept that vegans may not be possible for some people. We don't have to define who exactly they know who they are, but I think the idea of going to a restaurant and not creating a hassle about your food does not belong in that.
Isn't that a contested
category
idea, though, Nella? A contested idea, isn't it? That, I mean, the argument is that everybody can be vegan if veganism is seen as a philosophy that you adhere to, you understand and adhere to. I think the ones then who can't be vegan are infants, or, you know, people who are at the very end of their life and they've got some forms of dementia, which is a kind of problem for people who were vegan, and then as it were forget that they were, it gets a bit complicated there. But like some people say that other animals can be vegan, whereas if we think of veganism as a philosophy, not the diet, then shouldn't it be that every moral agent can be vegan?
I think that's the difficulty as well, because of how veganism has been so heavily co-opted. It's so, like, annoyingly associated with diet only, when of course it is a philosophy. And that's another reason why I tend to use anti-speciesist as well, because it generally helps clear up the confusion, because most people wouldn't hear anti-speciesist and necessarily associate it with diet. Yeah, I guess that's my point. Because anti-speciesist hasn't yet, at least, been co-opted into the diet world, into the capitalist world. It's very singularly and clearly.
Well, I guarantee this, though. You get a couple of anti-speciesists together, and it won't be long before they start talking about what they eat.
I suppose that the food aspect of veganism it becomes a big issue, because that's the one thing people do every single day that they can change. And also it's probably the biggest way that many people are complicit in the oppression of other animals, isn't it? Is by eating every single day, is those choices that they're making. So I suppose that's why it's such a big thing. And obviously I think now the movement focuses very heavily on that in outreach, the slaughterhouses and so-called farms and these places that are oppressing other animals for consumption. So that is quite a big focus in the movement as well. So I suppose it's no surprise then that it's become associated much more with that.
Yeah, look at that. Deb has thrown us a curveball right at the end. Look, we can do a program on that one, I think. But again, it does raise this thing, isn't it, about whether you're kind of forced to do things, or you're kind of in a situation where you do non-vegan things, but in your head you're still vegan. It's that becomes a tricky philosophical position, I think. Then.
And Dave asked, is Joaquin Phoenix not a vegan because he's a multimillionaire? So that brings us back to the whole capitalism.
Yeah, that's
question.
I think that's the one for our guest panelist, I reckon.
Yeah, I think that's definitely got Aiyana's name all over it, that one.
I guess so. I mean, veganism is anti-capitalist, and it doesn't feel like there is an ethical way to be a millionaire. So I would say yes. Or yeah, the full philosophy of veganism doesn't seem to be practiced in Joaquin's. I forgot the word, but in Joaquin's example, I guess. Because veganism is anti-capitalist, so I would say so. Which then I guess kind of invalidates the philosophy and practice of any of many vegan celebrities that, especially the mainstream movement, so readily will rally around, because they are multimillionaires and because they are capitalists. But I guess the movement is capitalist anyway, so it's kind of just a cycle of everybody, all the capitalists high-fiving.
Is James Aspie too rich to be vegan now?
Yeah, I was going to say, where's the cutoff point? When do you, as we all survive in a capitalist system, when's the cutoff point in that, okay, up to this level, you're still a vegan, but no, you're not a vegan anymore. Where's the cutoff point? I wonder, that's interesting, isn't it? Like in...
But then I think we maybe are, leading back into the territory of overclassification.
Yeah. Yeah, Michael. Yeah, I was just thinking about that.
Yeah,
actually.
I was going to say that too. Yeah.
Yeah, that he was riding horses, and I was quite upset by that when I was watching that film.
Because that was also a fairly recent film, wasn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah,
so yeah.
Right, yeah, about 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah, that's right.
But maybe now, if he says he's learning, and maybe in the next film he'll make a stand and won't do that, then so that would be and tell everyone why he isn't doing it. That would be even better.
Well, it must be tricky for an actor. I mean, if somebody shows up with if you sign up for a Western, as it were, you've got a problem straight away. But then if somebody shows up with a leather saddle and all the rest of the paraphernalia of oppressing horses, what do you do? So.
Well, I am an actor actually, and I've been in situations like that, and generally I just preface, like when you get the role, you just let everybody know that you're not using leather, that you are very specific about it. And in the case of riding horses or like swimming or anything sort of in that realm where it requires skill, most of the time they'll let you know in the audition process, because they want to know, can you swim? Can you use a horse? because maybe they want to find somebody who can already do it, so it's easier for like the production. So it's
have you ever lost a part because of that then, Aiyana?
No, I haven't lost a part because of that. They've always been able to make the adjustments in on my part to be respectful to animals, I guess. Luckily. Yeah.
Well, I think your challenge will become when they want to do a non-gendered remake of the Magnificent Seven, and you get cast for that, I suppose. Yeah.
Oh, Dave. Dave's really challenging us tonight. I will be a millionaire soon. I've been an ALF, Speak, Shack activist, a hunt sub, and a live export protester. I'm not a vegan.
My question to that would be, are you anti-capitalist?
So would you say then, Aiyana, you have to be, if we're defining veganism, we add into that definition anti-capitalist?
I think so, because capitalism and speciesism are like best friends in that they thrive off the exploitation of non-human animals. Non-human animals are only able to be exploited on the level and scale that they are because of the animal agriculture industrial system that forces them to reproduce and have children and destroy their bodies for speciesism. So I don't see a way where we can be, vegan in philosophy and in action and in practice and not be against the system that is exploiting them in the first place, I don't think there's any liberation for non-human animals that exists within capitalism.
Would those oppressions still happen in other systems? Say like if we had a socialist system, communist system, I suppose even if you look at communist countries have still had oppression of other animals, have still had speciesism within them. So I suppose it's not just not just the capitalism as it is. It's more the dynamic of power over, no matter what the system is, isn't it? It's having that power over others and using that power to use and exploit others for the gain of a few.
I think it's also,
that comes up. No, sorry, go on.
I think it's also the fact that like communism or socialism and anarchism have generally been developed with only humans in mind. As far as I'm aware, they weren't, these ideas weren't created with an inclusive understanding of speciesism or ageism or like probably other oppressions that, don't get discussed as much as well. And which I guess is another reason not to like put all your to necessarily adopt one single idea or ideology, because these weren't created with non-humans in mind. And if we want to be fully inclusive, then we might have to take from all different sorts of schools of thought. But yeah, I guess that's why that speciesism is still allowed to happen within those sorts of places and communities and countries, because it wasn't created with non-humans in mind. But I can only really critique capitalism because it's the system that I have had the most experience with, and capitalism is one of the main contributors to the exploitation of animals.
And also, I mean, by definition, it turns everyone and everything into a product from which it can profit. So it's inherently exploited.
Yeah, not just non-human animals, it's everything and everybody is a resource, not a living thing or a person or an individual.
So David makes a comment, you can have speciesism in other systems, but you won't have anti-speciesism in capitalism.
Yeah, I think that sums it up.
Yeah, it's very complex, isn't it? I think when you start to think about all these things, it's mind-boggling, really, like how to get out of the systems are so powerful and so oppressive, that so many systems that we're faced with, and like we started about to start the show, the boxes that we're in and the conditioning that we have, it's all so entangled and intertwined that it's hard to sort of see how we break free and how we break out of all these things and how we have total liberation, and especially how we end speciesism, isn't it? It's all so complexly tied together.
Yeah, if that's even the problem. I mean, some people would say that oppression would occur anyway because of what we are. I mean, like Freud said that, you know, humanity is a ferocious animal. And so whatever system we're in, one system will probably make our ferociousness, is that a word, worse, and some might mitigate against it, but it wouldn't change it fundamentally. The theory of anarchy would be that born into a different system would create a different humanity, and that's what the pioneers of the vegan society thought, that if we had a vegan world, it would by definition be less violent right across the board, because we were born into a world with a different mindset. It wouldn't be about profit. You know, I mean, like Watson said, veganism is about opposing the exploitation of sentient life, whether it's profitable to do so or not. He said that in 1945, which is quite a, you know, quite a powerful statement to make back then. You know, I mean, we talk about the end of the war and everything. But yeah, so if profit wasn't our motivation and justice was, just think of the difference the world would be.
It all starts with greed, really, doesn't it? If you go way back into history, it's like wanting more. Like once we started to put profit over just living well, thriving, you know, and wanting more and more, that's kind of where it seems to start, that greed. And maybe something in us that never feels satisfied. I think that's for some people it drives you to art, to create sort of great pieces of work or poetry or writing, or invent something incredible that helps humanity in some way. But I think that same kind of drives us to always want more and never be satisfied. And I think that's part of what drove, I guess, capitalism and kind of colonialism, even wanting more land, more profit, more, and then finding ways to make others work for you. I suppose that's where it all kind of came from, wasn't it? But it does seem to stem from greed.
And that's why mutual aid is so important, because it restores the balance. If instead of, you know, deciding to colonize or enslave, people had just created coalitions to share resources that they didn't have in their home countries, then we'd be living in a very different world. But people decided to, you know, be greedy. And that means that also we have the choice. Like, greed is not inherent to us, it's not our only option. If it was our only option, would we even be able to, you know, practice and think up concepts like mutual aid? I mean, the fact that it exists within nature so thoroughly means that, you know, this is how it's supposed to be. We have the option to do it. We just have to be courageous enough to choose it, knowing that we may not know the specifics of the outcome. We may not have every question answered, but it's better than where we are now.
Well, that's capitalism sorted. All done. No, and U2 is making the point about how, you know, people talk about things they have no understanding, no idea about how big and complex a thing they are talking about, and can offer no alternatives. I think that is the difficulty. I think we do realize how complex and big it is. It's just that it's very difficult to see how we create alternatives. And I suppose it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, doing it on a very community-based level, locally, grassroots activism, those kind of things. That's all we can do, isn't it? Change ourselves as well. Like look to ourselves each day. How can we be a better person tomorrow? That's the only real comparison that we should make. Not compare ourselves so much to others to beat ourselves up with, but compare ourselves to our previous selves. Have we learned? Are we evolving? What can we do better? What can we offer rather than just take? And doing that every day in small ways, big ways, however we can. And if we all did that a little bit more, maybe, and then on a local community level, that things would change.
Yeah, I think, yeah, exactly. We have to start somewhere. Like, we may not have all the knowledge in the world, and that's okay, but we have to start with what we know and stick to what we know and aim to just have more knowledge. Not in a greedy way, but aim to reach new heights of evolution and growth and ingenuity and creativity and community. There is always ways that we can get better. So even if when a revolution happens somewhere, if when we reach a space of liberation, things can always improve. And I think that is where we start to answer those difficult questions that we've been discussing today. That's when we start to work out how we can, you know, support, help, deal with, understand people who continue to be violent and abusive in a world that is more liberatory, because it can always be better. We can always keep evolving and growing, and whether or not we reach and live in an anarchist society, a socialist society, a communist society, whatever we're living in, it can always improve. It should always be improving. We should always be changing, and there is no full stop to existence or life. And there will always be alternatives. We just have to find them and try and see what works in the moment. And tomorrow will be different. Tomorrow will be completely different, and we might think, oh no, okay, let's find something else. But yeah, I think it's just constant movement and constant growth.
Yeah, the process starts with looking at your old essays and thinking, I wouldn't say that nowadays. And Amber has brought us full circle in a sense, because they say that the and then this is very much what Herbert Marcuse said. This idea that you don't have to have a very worked out kind of plan ahead of you, a blueprint. You know, that is every kind of dot and cross and everything is already settled before you know that what you've got is not good for us. You know, that kind of thing. So. Yeah. Right. So it's 90 minutes in.
Don't tell me we run over again.
No. How could we?
Should we say it's Aiyana's fault? Should we just say that we're usually really good, but Aiyana's a bad influence on us? Because
but that would be a blatant influence, wouldn't it? Because we always go over regardless.
Oh, I can't get away with that. We'll let you off.
Whatever, time to construct anyway.
Well, that's a good one to end with anyway. That's pretty good.
Well, thank you to Aiyana again for coming on for a second week. Really enjoyed that chat. We kind of went into some real deep, complex philosophical topics there, didn't we? And thanks to everyone in the chat as well. There's been some really great chat going on in there as well, and some really good comments.
I hate it when people say very good things right at the end, because you can't really.
Oh, Benny!
Benny, you let us down again. What's the matter with your land?
Vegan land use model would be the greatest. Benny, might have to get Benny back on for another.
Yes, justify your statement.
Oh yeah.
Right. So are we finishing and waving goodbye, or has anybody got any final words of wisdom? that's a good one. What do you think, Wendy?
Oh,
I wouldn't like to speak for Brian. I'd have to have a little conference with him about that one. At the moment, he's just sitting, looking as if to say, "Where is my fucking food?"
I bet he's doing that, isn't he? He's doing this.
Yeah, it's like that.
Yeah.
Time's not a construct for Brian.
He's literally staring at me. Yeah, he knows it's 7:30.
Right then, people. I'll put the end captions up. So get your best giggles together, and we'll say goodbye until next week, everyone. So thanks very much for tuning in.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Royal wave. Oh, Brian's just coming back. Oh, Brian.